Hi. In the previous video, I briefly mentioned I was a right-winger at one point in my past. The story of why I became a right-winger to begin with is a story for another time, but you might wonder, how did I turn from being a rather conservative ultra-capitalist, almost a monarchist too, into being a bisexual, gender-fluid trans femme slash femboy socialist who likes Marx? Quite honestly, that's a journey that cannot be told in one short video, but I can share part of it. I'll tell you how tabletop role-playing games contributed to this change. Growing up, I always daydreamed about fantasy worlds and being a character in them. And many shows and cartoons I was watching often had a D&D episode. Seeing that there is a hobby that exists that is all about that, but with other people, was magical to me. I always wanted to play, but it seemed like something that exists only in the USA. Beyond my reach, never heard of anyone playing those games where I lived. It wasn't until I became an adult that I started discovering other game systems, as well as communities around me that actually played them. Eventually, after conquering my social anxiety, I signed up for a game of D&D. By then, I was around 21 or 22. The height of my right-wing phase had actually been a few years earlier, around 18 or to 20, but I was still firmly on that side of the political spectrum. I had, however, calmed down a lot. I was less chronically online, wasn't spending my time immersed in right-wing spaces, wasn't really following the news, and was generally becoming a more normal person. That made it definitely easier to change my opinions, and role-playing as a medium is inherently about seeing other perspectives, unless you always play the same character and focus more on gameplay than role-playing, I suppose. I like to take it seriously, think a lot about how the experiences of my characters shape their personalities and beliefs, and then act on it to the best of my ability. When you do that, you spend a lot of time putting yourself in the shoes of people who aren't you. And when you keep doing that, it's really hard not to broaden your perspective. It's hard not to empathize with people who think differently from you. And eventually, it's hard not to start questioning some of the things you thought you already knew. I could bring up a few examples. Like the time I played a guy who started viewing animals, monsters, and humans all as equals. So naturally, he murdered them all equally. I don't murder people. Not yet. So I just took the opposite direction of not doing that. It did, however, slightly contribute to me avoiding eating meat. Or another example, just the fact that most campaigns involve fighting against some sort of oppression, usually coming from some kind of ruling class, and if you keep doing that over and over again in all sorts of different scenarios, maybe it starts to have an effect on how you see the world. But really, there's only one example I want to tell you about, one pivotal point. My older brother and I signed up for a game of Warhammer Fantasy. In total there were 3 players and a GM, all dudes, or whatever I am too. At the time, just thought I am a dude. I was playing Josie, a young barber surgeon who was obsessed with expanding her medical knowledge and sharing it with the world. She had red shoulder-length hair, was short and pretty thick, and... oh god. I made the mistake of playing a woman in an all-dude group. Yeah, it wasn't a great experience. I didn't have to wait long for the other players to start displaying their misogyny towards my character. I would try to explain my plan, and they would simply talk over me. What I had to say was less important than what they wanted to say. I would express an opinion that diverged from theirs, and suddenly my argument didn't count, not because they had disproven it, but because I was a woman. I would take a bath because I was playing a healer who understood that dirt would spread sickness, and they would joke that I was acting crazy because I was a woman. And when I argued with them about the decisions that I genuinely thought were going to get us killed, they didn't engage with my arguments either. Instead, they decided I was only being difficult because I was on my period and therefore hysterical. Gods, there were so many jokes about my supposed period, It was basically their explanation for anything Josie did that they didn't like. If she was angry, it was her period. If she was emotional, her period. If she disagreed with them, well, obviously, her period. And honestly, that part stuck with me. After that game, I swore to myself that I would never make a period jokes like that myself. Not unless I was like completely sure it would be fun, at least. But even beyond the jokes, there was something about the whole experience that really got to me. I had created this character. I knew why she believed what she believed. I knew what she was trying to accomplish. And I was trying to make decisions based on her perspective. Beliefs and decisions that had nothing to do with being a woman. She was a layered character with her own backstory, opinions, and experiences. And then I was watching the other players dismiss everything she said for a reason that had absolutely nothing to do with what she was actually saying. She was reduced to nothing but being just a woman. I'm sure partially the players were exaggerating this behavior to reflect the dark fantasy reality of the setting, at least their vision of it. It was a game after all, and I understand that sometimes you play characters who hold some pretty awful beliefs. But I could tell it's not a total invention, but some part of what they actually thought. And after a few sessions, I was just done with it. A few times a female co-worker of one of the pairs joined us for the game, and honestly, having another woman at the table was a very welcome addition. It was interesting to see how atmosphere slightly changed with her present. The guys toned down the jokes when there was an actual woman at the table. They still made them, mind you, just fewer of them. And to be fair, I'm also pretty sure that this particular player had a crush on that woman, so that could have something to do with toning down the jokes. Either way, after 7 sessions, I dropped out. There was definitely fun to be had, but the group had other problems too, and my personal relationship with my brother was also in the group. Wasn't particularly great at the time. I didn't really want to spend more of my free time around him. So eventually, I decided it just wasn't worth it. 7 sessions, a few hours a week, and somehow, that was enough of a taste of what it can feel like to be treated as a woman in our society, to seriously change how I thought about a lot of things. Before that, whenever people talked about toxic masculinity, I understood the concept in theory. I just didn't think it was particularly widespread. Sure, some dudes are toxic, some men are misogynists, but I thought of those as individual problems. Bad people behaving badly. Not something that was deeply woven into everyday interactions. I was evidently wrong. My bad. I admit my fault. Experiencing even a small amount of it myself made it much harder to dismiss. And once I actually had noticed it, I started seeing it everywhere. The little things, the assumptions, the way people talk over you, the way certain behaviors are treated as normal when coming from men, but ridiculous or hysterical when coming from women. And that, for me, was the beginning of a much bigger domino effect. Because once you notice and accept that misogyny and toxic masculinity aren't just isolated incidents, but can be widespread and embedded into the way society functions, it becomes much easier to understand the idea of patriarchy, something I thought was kind of stupid before. And once you start looking at society through that lens, you start noticing systemic racism, you start noticing ableism. You start questioning how capitalism has to keep most people disadvantaged to keep a few in power. You start looking at the relationship between the Western world and the global South, and how our society is almost built on exploiting and bombing them. You start unraveling all of it from a single thread because it all is fueled by similar systems of oppression, designed to keep other groups of people in power over the others. The pattern keeps repeating with some adjustments. I experienced one small piece of it firsthand, and actually acknowledging the problem, believing in it, made me see all the others too. Let's be clear though, this one game didn't change my worldview by itself. I was always curious and willing to learn. So for years I was watching video essays, reading discussions, listening to people with perspective different from mine, and slowly questioning things I had previously taken for granted. The change took years. It wasn't some sudden moment where I played Warhammer on Tuesday and I woke up a socialist on Wednesday. But at the same time, I don't think we should underestimate the effect of personal experience. You can hear someone explain a problem 100 times and think, sure, I guess that's a thing, it makes sense. But then you just keep living as you were. And then you experience a tiny piece of it by yourself. Suddenly, that abstract idea becomes tangible. You understand why someone might feel the way they do. You understand why something that never bothered you could be exhausting or hurtful to someone else. And once you've had that experience, it's much harder to simply dismiss what other people are telling you. For me, that's one of the things tabletop role-playing gave me. It wasn't just a game where I got to pretend to be someone else. It gave me an excuse to step outside of myself, to inhabit people with different experiences, different values, different problems, and sometimes to experience what it was like to be treated differently, simply because of who I was pretending to be. Hell, role-playing was a major part of why I made my previous video about my gender identity. So yeah, I owe tabletop role-playing games a lot. They allowed me to see the world through someone else's eyes. And once you learn how to do that, it's really difficult to go back to seeing the world only through your own. Hello, welcome to Postscript Void. Thank you for watching, I really appreciate you taking the time. Just want to give a small update to the previous video. I started taking some steps to experiment and better reflect my appearance with my identity. Thank you everyone for your support and encouragement. And if you want to help more, all donations now will be going towards laser hair removal on my face, as it's one of my most dysphoric things for me. Hate having this cling to me, to my face, it's horrible. And also, I'm trying to return to regular streaming, we'll see how it goes, but please keep an eye out. And for those unaware, I have a Discord server, link is in the description. So, come hang out if you feel like it. And yeah, that's it for now. Next video will be probably either about how hentai made me walk, or about my dysphoria. We'll see. I'll think about it. Anyway, bye bye!